Welcome to the Career Coffee Club, where we brew the perfect blend of insight and expert advice relating to anyone looking to climb the career ladder or those who are currently seeking a new position. In each episode, we will be meeting with hiring managers and industry experts who will give their own unique perspective to support those who are looking for a new position or looking to climb the career ladder.
So whether you're just starting out, seeking that next career move, or that one big promotion, we have the insights for you to succeed.
So grab your favourite cup of coffee, settle in, and join us as we help you to build your career one conversation at a time. So hello and welcome back to the Career Coffee Club. Today we're meeting with an operations director from a very large global supply chain and logistics organisation, very successful. And what I'm really excited about with this one is that we're actually meeting someone today who started from very entry level and has moved through the career ladder. So has got some great insight and support to give to listeners and viewers.
Yeah, I'm excited about this one.
And I suppose before we get into introductions and too much, it's good to refresh everybody on who we are. So
I'm Oliver Bridle. I'm an internal talent acquisition lead for Envisix, which is a deep tech company. We do head-up displays for the automotive industry. And
and I'm Matt. So I co-own Arrow Search, who are a operational and corporate recruiting and staffing organisation across the UK and the US. So hopefully with our insights and our support, and then also Kevin's insights and support.
More Kevin, probably.
More Kevin. Hopefully we can start to get some good insights and support out to people who are looking to grow their career in the logistics and supply chain space. So Kevin, welcome.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's great to be here. So Kevin Miller, I'm an ops director within a leading 3PL logistics company, as you know.
And how do you feel having a mic shoved in your face?
Yeah, so it's a bit awkward, isn't it? But
the beginning is always the worst part, and the end, because you don't know how to finish. The middle bit's good because it's just conversation.
It takes a while to get used to. It does take a while to get used to. But as we kind of said, obviously you began your career at the entry, right? You started off in the warehouse. So can you just give us a bit of an overview as to kind of how you made those first steps, and if you like, your career in a summary, if we want to say that?
Yeah. Look, 24 years in now to logistics. I started off by not being in logistics, in all fairness. So I just hated the cold. I was out in building sites and various different things. It wasn't my career choice. I wanted to be a pilot, an astronaut, firefighter, as all young boys do. But still time. Definitely still time. But just fell into logistics, as I say, to get out the cold, really. And just started off as a kind of picker in a couple of warehouses, a few agency jobs, that type of thing. And then landed in a business, Travis Perkins, PLC in Northampton, and just started working in the warehouse as a picker. I remember my first day actually, and it was 2004. It wasn't before lots of health and safety, but it was like, right, who wants to drive one of those big forklifts? And I was like, I'll kind of give it a go. So it was like, right, you're on replenishment. Here's your task. I'll come and see you back in an hour. It was driving toys around the warehouse, really. And quite quickly, I kind of just generally my mind just kind of got to be spinning lots of different plates in one go. And there was different opportunities that was coming up, like, different activity or project and things. And I was always just kind of putting my hand up for it, really. So just wanting to learn something new and get into some different things. And it really progressed through going off a picking shift into a goods in environment, dealing with inbound suppliers, working on stock and inventory, and then getting involved in the wider business and various different things.
So sorry, Kevin. So was Travis Perkins? That's a builders type. Was it builders merchants? Yeah. So you were indoors on that one.
Indoors, not outdoors in the yard. It was the distribution centres.
And how big was it back then when you started with them? How big was Travis Perkins? Because they're quite big now, aren't they?
Yeah, they were larger than they are now, actually.
Oh, really?
They had various different brands in their business, so like Wix's, City Plumbing, CCF, Travis Perkins brand, and so on. And they made some acquisitions, actually, throughout my time while I was there. And their supply chain was quite complex in terms of lots of different warehouses servicing different parts of the business. And over the recent years, so I guess within the last 5 or 6 years, they've sold off different parts of their businesses and merged some of them. So they've kind of disbanded it really to really focus on their core business.
I didn't realise they were that big.
Yeah. Yeah,
I only know them because they sponsor the Saints.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, quite a large organisation with quite a complex logistics network behind it.
Cool. And I mean, I've always been amazed when it comes to some of the warehouse packing, because I'm someone who can't find my car keys half the time. So how many kind of SKUs, how many products would you have in the warehouses that you're kind of looking for? So something comes through and it says, go find item number X. How many X's are there?
Yeah, it depends on the scale and size of the operation, I guess. So, if I think back to my days at Travis Perkins, that was anywhere upwards of 56,000 different SKUs. So you have specific pick bins and systemic locations that will guide the pickers around their pick paths, if you like. But you could have warehouses that have anywhere from like 100 really upwards. So it all depends on the customer and the type of product they're servicing, really.
Yeah, I wouldn't be very good at that, to be honest with you.
No.
And because you mentioned then that you kind of climb the ladder through projects and you're getting involved in multiple different projects. Where did we go from there? What kind of was the next step?
Yeah, so for me, the next step was outside of kind of supply chain operations was understanding more about the extended supply chain. So I've done a stint in category buy-in. So actually the purchasing and procurement of the products that come in and then working out how they then get from A to B to the end customer and growing effectively categories and businesses within business. So that was kind of the next step for me, and then quickly fell back into operations. So, going from them functional sort of roles back into operations, into general management, then moved out of that business into the 3PL provider I'm with now, into kind of site management roles, and then 6 years on from starting that business into an ops director role, which I've been in for the last couple of years now.
Was there a key moment or a key project or a key decision that you made that really catapulted you, or was it really just a series of them, of putting your hands up for those opportunities?
Yeah, for me personally, it was a series of them. I've been quite fortunate actually to have some mentors along the way and kind of bosses really that have encouraged me and helped me on that path. So anything I put my hand up for, even if it wasn't something I knew about or, hadn't really learnt before, really helped get me into them and coach me along or put me in touch with people in the network that could provide that learning for me, but just putting confidence in.
So do you think that was luck though? Do you think that you were just lucky that you had those people at that time, or was there something that, and we'll probably come on to this later on, but was there something that you did, your aptitude that they saw that made them want to mentor you or help you in those positions or to progress, do you think?
I think it's a bit of both. Look, you can get some really good leaders, and then you can get some bosses, right? Who just like dictate and this is what I want you to do and sit in your lane over there, and that's all I need you to crack on with. But for me, I think it's about that two-way interaction. If you show willing and you're showing that you're putting yourself out there, out your comfort zone, to really try and learn and make a difference in what you're doing in the workplace, then those people tend to latch onto you, and then and undoubtedly more stuff ends up coming your way, right? Because you give the stuff you want doing to people that can do it.
Yeah, for sure.
They trust you then as well, don't they?
Absolutely. And if you can demonstrate what you deliver, then that builds momentum. But you've got to put the energy and the effort into it in the first place to be able to get on that path. And I've been involved in some pretty big projects, as I mentioned there with some of the acquisitions and changes in the supply chain with Travis Perkins. I was involved in warehouse closures, warehouse new builds, big large scale projects, building revenues in categories that was really game changing for them organizations, and playing quite key roles in them. So, again, you apply yourself, you put your hand up, you volunteer, people put confidence in you, can get put forward for those big scale projects.
I think something that's important to remember here is that we've just got to keep remembering that journey. that to anyone listening, it sounds like we're looking at the top level, which, don't get me wrong, you've climbed an incredible ladder. But it all began just going one day, I want to be an astronaut, I want to be an RAF pilot. Neither's going to really happen. I'm fed up of getting cold and wet on a building site. I'm going to go get an indoor job in a warehouse. And I think that's a very important message to anyone who's listening, because I'm in a similar position in the fact that, in fact, kind of different, but I never worked outside because, as my parents will tell you, my manual working capabilities are terrible. I've got very delicate office hands. So when I began working at uni, I wanted to be in sport. My aim was to be a sports therapist or a physical therapist. Went and done all the qualifications, and then one day just turned around and said, don't enjoy this. You know, I got my degree, worked for a year or so afterwards, and wasn't enjoying what I was doing. So this big hole that every single recruiter seems to fall into, because no one wakes up and thinks, oh, I can't wait to be a recruiter. But you just fall into something, destiny, I guess, if you want to look at it that way. And I've had a great career. But again, similar to you, it comes from knocking on doors and saying, I want to go at that. You know, okay, you're not quite ready for that step. Okay, well, how do I get there then? It's not about just sitting there and accepting no as an answer. It's going, well, okay, tell me, how do I get to that level? What do I have to complete in terms of skills, training, qualifications, or is it experience led? And if it's a case of you've got to change personality, be open to that feedback positively, because to Kev's point, there are bosses who will just dictate and say to you, no. But then there's also a lot of leaders out there that if you're happy to receive constructive feedback, you can be on this path that Kevin's talking about, right? You know, you start on the warehouse, you end up in ops.
But I guess the other thing, we've spoke about this, Kevin, is you have to be patient sometimes as well, don't you? Because you can't go, I'll put my hand up for that and I do a really great job for 3 months and then expect the next thing to come along, or like someone give me a pat on the back, I've done such a great job, but here's a promotion type thing. So, but was there examples of that where you kind of just had to just knuckle down and just wait your time?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, look, there's things out there that you'll do that you particularly don't enjoy, but you're right, you've got to stick with it. You can't just be a short burst of time and then everything falls on your lap. You make mistakes along the way, but you got to learn from them, right? It's the way we all build our experience. And there's been a couple of roles that I've gone for during that journey where I thought, you know what, I'm ready for that and I deserve it. And actually it hasn't happened. And whilst at the time you might not be happy about it, when you sit back and reflect and you think, well, actually, I wasn't. When you do get it a year or two down the line or whatever it may be, I've definitely sat back and reflected and said, actually, I wasn't ready for that ops manager at that time, or wasn't ready for that role. And it's landed at the right time, and your experience has built even more. So there is an era of you've got to be quite patient at things as well, but it's within your gift. And as long as you just pick yourself back up and say, right, what do I need to do to get there next time? And look, that feedback isn't always something we all want to hear as human beings. It can be hard sometimes, but
I think it is as well. I think it's more so now. I think as the generations are going, I think everything is wanted to be progressed really quickly. And I guess there's a balance as well, isn't there? Between, I'm not saying that you should, if you're not getting the opportunities in your current job, that you shouldn't look elsewhere at other organizations, but not all the times. You need to find that balance, don't you? Not after your first knockback and go, right, well, if you're not going to give me a promotion, I'm off.
There's that trade-off, isn't there? Because something I see quite a bit at the moment is people saying, well, I'm doing this job on a secondment, or I'm being involved in this project, but I've not had a pay rise. And you kind of think, well, it's the first time you've done this. It's the first exposure you've got. So kind of sometimes you've got to absorb that experience as the pay rise.
It's like Roy Keane says, it's your job.
But I think there is a perspective though of going, well, actually, do you know what? Sometimes you have to absorb the fact that what you do now will pay dividends, but dividends don't get paid out immediately. Sometimes you've got to bank the experience, you've got to bank the work, but there is a line, like you said a minute ago, where you can then be taken advantage of. And, unfortunately in my job, external recruitment, we see a lot of people who are classed as finance directors, or their job duties are, but actually they're getting the pay of a finance manager. And you think, well, okay, it's gone too far. So I think to anyone listening, that's an important thing to remember, is make sure you do enough to get the experience, but you're not doing too much that you're then being taken advantage of. That's a tough balance to get.
I'll be keen to understand. I think we're on the same page, but be keen to get your take on it. Is that my feeling as well is that when you're early on in your career, you're not doing everything for an hourly wage. It's not a, because you want to put extra in, don't you? So if that means you do a bit of extra research at home for something, that's not an hourly rate type thing, is it? So if you want to better yourself for the business and for you, you can't expect to always get paid for it. And I know it sounds,
the experience is the pay.
Yeah.
Sometimes the experience is the pay.
Yeah, I'm with you. I see it as almost your own personal investment, right? You might pay to go to uni. You might have expenses to go to college, get experience, whatever it may be. But it's very similar in the workplace. If you're stretching yourself and you're putting yourself out there, and you're not getting rewarded for it, as in, I'm doing this project or this secondment, and there's someone over there earning a different amount, then it will come. You do need to be very careful, as you say, Matt, that you don't just put yourself out there and you just carry on, but your time will come. The dividends will get paid out.
Yeah.
And your experience will show that. And ultimately, if you're not happy with it, you've got a decision and a choice to make, haven't you, at that point in time. But it is that personal investment you're making into your own career.
And what about I suppose before we kind of move on to that next bit of kind of how to get this career, how to start a career, and how to move into warehouse, supply chain, logistics, and for anyone listening who's interested, it's probably important we break down what some of these words are. I mean, we all know what a warehouse is.
Well, I know what 3PL is, but I only recently, so it might be good.
So we know what
we start on that.
And I mean, from my role in recruitment, we know what a lot of these terms are because we hear them. I think, COVID was a big example where everyone went, supply chain. There's problems with supply chain. No one really knew what the supply chain was. So can you break down some of these for us? What is the difference between logistics, 3PL or third party logistics, and then also supply chain? So what are the difference between kind of the three? And you mentioned purchasing. So can you just give us a breakdown as to what some of this is to anyone who's looking to enter that world? Yeah,
so supply chain, it's an interesting world really, but it is the end-to-end. It's how do I get something from A to B and all the processes in between. So third-party logistics, for example, is providing a logistics service for a company. So you might have a company that's great at selling things, big brand shops, that type of stuff. But actually, they've got no real, no idea. That's probably the wrong word.
Like infrastructure, and
how to get it from A to B, or the expertise. And their job is to sell stuff, right, and get it out to the consumer. Third-party logistics provider's job is to get it from A to B and do all the processes in between. And I'll explain a little bit about what some of those kind of processes are in a minute. You could have a company that does their own logistics and they'll give it a go and they'll set up. And, for sure that might absolutely work for their size of business. But as they scale and as they go through transformations and change, they might need to rely on a third-party provider as well. You mentioned purchasing. That's just an input really into the supply chain. So, in many businesses, you'll have a purchasing team who are there. They're doing the deals with the suppliers and the producers, and then they're procuring the product to come in. And then you're picking up that product from those manufacturers, if you like, who and then you're getting into the warehouse or whatever your logistics structure is, and then getting out to the consumer or the end user.
So, for example, then, if we use a product that absolutely everyone will know, an iPhone, if we imagine that the iPhones are now created in the UK, right, we would have a team who would look at, okay, we need to buy the smallest chips. I don't know what they are, the chips that go into Apple phones, right? And the only place to get them is from warehouses in Taiwan, right? So your purchasing team would speak to the guys in Taiwan about buying that chip, that product, right? Mm-hmm. So then, because I'm Apple and I don't have a distribution or logistics team, I need to now consider, well, okay, how do I get these millions of chips from Taiwan to my base in the UK, but my product's actually manufactured in China. So therefore, my chips now need to go to China before they go from China to the UK. And that's where, for instance, third-party logistics might come in to go, well, hang on a minute, you don't have the infrastructure to get this done, but you can use our sea freight to go from Taiwan to China, then our air freight to go from China to the UK, and then our distribution centres and our lorries and our trucks that will get you from London to wherever they're being sold in the end. And that's an example of the supply chain.
In its simplest form, yeah.
In its simplest form,
There's
yeah,
a lot
yeah,
more
yeah,
goes
yeah.
into it. So even if you just think about how do I get that product from Taiwan to the UK, there's all
Import,
sorts of other stuff.
export.
You've got your import, your
Yeah.
export, your clearances.
Taxes.
You might have a different logistics provider that's getting it from factory to port, and then from port over to the UK, then clearance from UK into warehouse. But you've also got the raw materials and everything that goes into it. So supply chain's a vast area, and it isn't just a parcel company or a warehouse, someone driving forklifts and things like that. There is many, many things that go into it. Really, the best way of putting it, and people often put it to me this way, is it's end-to-end problem solving.
Yeah,
Right? No
for
one
sure.
thing is the same.
How's it changed over the years? Because I imagine that technology is massive now in the supply chain, and like you say, it's not just about picking a box up from one place and taking it to another. There's a whole host of different parts of it, and I imagine the boom of e-commerce has probably had a massive impact on the supply chain as well. But how much has it changed?
It's changed a lot, actually, and there's probably 3 or 4 things that have really impacted it over the last, let's say, 10 years. So e-commerce, absolutely, the real growth of the internet and the demand. People want stuff now. They want to order it and it's in their hand, but they don't want to go out.
They don't want to wait 7 days anymore,
Get it?
do they?
Absolutely.
My son being one of them.
Yeah, and then you've had different things like Brexit and COVID. You mentioned COVID. No one knew the word supply chain before COVID. Everybody knows it now. Still don't understand what it's all about, but everybody knows it. And then you've also had different things that are related to those areas, like Brexit, for example, with migration of resource and labour. And what that's really doing to the industry is just driving different behaviours. So automation and technology is a real forward-thinking way now of trying to get things done at a better price with the same quality, right? But using technologies that are out there. And that brings a different skill set into the industry even so. And there's all sorts of different studies and various different things that have gone on about how mature logistics, functions, whether it's transport or warehouse or people, how mature they are in the process to be able to deal with some of these changes. But it's coming down the road fast, right? I mean, AI is going to revolutionize what we do. Everybody can see that. But there are lots of different things being introduced. And it's not about replacing jobs in supply chains, in some manufacturing facilities, absolutely. But it is about how we do things different. How do you get that product from A to B to that consumer cheaper, efficiently?
So it's changing the role slightly then, rather than replacing, isn't it?
A lot of change in the role. So you think about technology, you've got automated forklifts, you've got robotic arms, you've got various different camera systems that are replacing scanning functionality. There's a lot going on, even to robotic cleaners that are scrubbing warehouse and shop floors. That is just replacing people, but that means then people can focus in on different things. But what it also means is there's a different skill set we need in the industry to be able to, maintain and keep them equipments going, and bring new ideas into it as well. So, your traditional driving a box from A to B in a warehouse across a goods in path to a put away path can now be done by a robot, and it brings a different mindset.
I remember going to a warehouse 7 years ago, so pre-Brexit, and big multinational 3PL. I remember walking in and seeing people walking around. They looked a little bit like scuba diving goggles, right? And I remember thinking, what are they wearing? And it was one of the first forms of, I don't know whether you call it AI or what it is,
virtual reality type.
Yeah, literally, like, and they would basically say, like, I need to pick codes A, B, C, and F, and it would be like a bit like what you guys do at Envisix, like a heads-up display that kind of comes up on the goggles and shows them where to go and how to get there. So then it removes the human thinking, and it's just quick, because it's just, I'll just go wherever these are telling me to go. And then, as you say, vision picking, it tells me where everything is. I mean, that's pretty crazy compared to where you were 24 years ago.
Yeah,
and I guess
absolutely.
that avoids the errors rather than anything like that. Would that be the main reason for that? Speed and errors, or?
Well, it should be eliminating errors. It's more around efficiencies than anything else. You're still going to get errors, right? Because you've still got a human interface into that part and it's not repetitive. But that sort of technology does exist. It hasn't really matured from my experience. I'm sure there's operations out there that are using it en masse, but it's very, very well renowned in the kind of parcel industry where you're picking multiple orders at once and you've got to put them in almost like pigeonhole trolley slots. So it will show you pick that product from there and put it in that box, or pick that product from there and put it in that box, rather than scan and doing different things. It just helps with that efficiency side of it.
And is there, to the best of your knowledge, I appreciate you won't have been in every warehouse, are we at the stage of having fully automated warehouses yet?
Yeah, there are some out there. I mean, the business I work in are investing in large automated warehouses, predominantly around, taking a pallet from the point of inbound, moving it and storing it and bringing it back out of automated storage. That's been around for years, right? But how do you then engineer out those manual interventions? So there are warehouses out there that will have things called AVOs, automatic vehicle offloading, where a lorry will park up on the door, a platform will come and just take those pallets out the back of the vehicle, put it into an automated system, and then load it back out again when it's required. So you can have pallets that are coming in that just are not being touched.
So before we go on to more around the job seekers and searches and career development part, just one thing we were talking about, saying that automation and the technology is not replacing roles. Just a question for you. So the way you are currently, has your workforce decreased over the last 5 years, or has it increased as a whole, would you say?
I think as a whole, it's increased.
Yeah.
And I think the drive for that is there is a lot more things happening in the supply chain. We talk about the consumer increase their expectations.
Yeah.
There's different steps in the process, or there's lots of different things coming into it. Like, Brexit has brought a lot of processes around customs clearances and things like that, where you now need administrators to do that.
Okay.
Or you need people to be working in functional roles that are then, working downstream on supply chain to make sure products available. You talk about chips in phones and stuff. There was a massive chip shortage that
huge.
Impacted
the cars,
technology in cars and everything.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of people now sorting that type of stuff out and bringing more logistics back into the UK on the back of Brexit, right?
Yeah.
Not just on the back of COVID. And then as we talk about technology and the AI, there is, lots more people that are developing that type of stuff behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Do I think it will reduce people demand in the industry? I think at some point there will be a break
There'll
point.
be a tipping point.
We haven't got a mass amount of people that are wanting to use logistics as a foundation of a career.
Yeah.
The market at the moment is very fluid. Lots of people moving around. They want a different variety, and people don't quite understand supply chain of what variety that can bring for them. As well. So. Yeah, but
so
at the moment, I think there's an increase.
It's moving away from picker packers. Like that's the bit that's been.
Yeah, but it sounds like, although we're moving away necessarily potentially from picker packers, there's some really exciting stuff happening in the space.
Yeah.
That one thing I'm a believer of is that AI is going to transform and change the way that we work, but it's also going to revolutionize process, efficiency, speed. I'm not necessarily 100% sure. Well, in fact, I know it can't do it on its own. You're going to need humans to map and process and work with these tools. In which case, I think anyone who's worried about kind of entering a space because picker packers might change and that lower level or entry level role might change, think about what the exciting roles look like in the next couple of levels, or what transforms from a picker packer position and what that looks like in the next 5 years, because the roles are still going to be there. Robots might do the actual do, but what else happens? It's a transformation and an upskilling. And I do believe that everyone needs to embrace AI, or you will be left behind. If you don't embrace AI, as a business, you will be left behind. But I don't think necessarily that we're in a world that you hear some people panicking about, that we're entering, iRobot space and we're going to be controlled by robots. I think from your message there, it's very clear to say humans are still needed. There's a lot of stuff that these robots can and will not be able to do in the foreseeable future.
Absolutely. And let's be honest, it's an expensive bit of technology, isn't it? When you're deploying things like humanoid robots and stuff like that to replace humans doing the job,
massive,
it is huge. And where's your investment best spent? If it improves efficiency and process, then great. If it doesn't, then arguably, are you going to invest? So that whole maturity curve I spoke about, comes into it at that point, and what is your return on investment. So plays a big part. But yeah, I certainly think, and from my experience, for the foreseeable, it's just a different skill that's needed rather than.
So basically, keep being nice to Siri and Alexa, and they'll be nice to us back.
Absolutely.
But the opportunity, just within supply chain, is the same as with sort of any kind of business. You know, the ones that are probably more well known, like you Jaguar Land Rovers and I don't know, Dyson or Shark Ninja. These types of companies where candidates or people who are looking for roles get attracted to because they think, oh, it's great, it's got that kudos and stuff. But in supply chain, I mean, in Jaguar, in all of those companies, it is a supply chain business ultimately still, isn't it? You've still got your sales, your account management, you've still got your process, your purchasing, and like there's a whole ecosystem that you have within the supply chain industry. And you could argue that the supply chain industry may even be further ahead because they're working for those companies to make their process smoother.
For sure.
So yeah.
For sure. So I suppose we kind of touched on what supply chain, logistics, 3PL, other areas are.
I'm all over it.
Obviously, if there is anyone listening who wants more advice or is looking to get a career in this space and doesn't know where to start, feel free to drop us a note and we can always go back to Kev and ask more questions and hopefully get some answers for people if they do reach out. But I guess it'd be really interesting now for anyone who's listening to hear about, I want to change role, I'm looking for a new job, or I'm looking to enter this world. So how does the selection process work for you? And also, I suppose, what would be your kind of advice to anyone who's looking to enter into this sector from a do's and don'ts perspective?
Yeah, so for me, I mean, the interest in the sector is, as I say, there's a variety of roles. So if your skill set isn't necessarily manual work, but it is more office based, there's various office roles. If your mindset is I like numbers, you can come and do finance. All these different roles exist within the supply chain and logistics kind of
network
jobs and network, And the approach on that is just give it a go. You don't necessarily need the experience or the education to be able to do it. I didn't have any education in any of these areas I'm in. Throughout my career, I've gained some experience and been out there and done some courses and diplomas and different things like that. But a lot of it is based on experience. And as I said, just putting yourself out there and saying, I want to learn that, I want to have a go. And there's a lot of people around you that will do it. And actually within, certainly the business I work within, the back people to be able to go and learn something. So if you do want to be an accountant, you can go work with them and they'll help you on that training journey to do that. But put yourself out there and go to some career fairs or whatever it may be, go speak to some businesses, go speak to some recruiters, and just understand what it is all about, because there are skills that you'll be able to add. There's different journeys for, let's say, school leavers. We're heavily looking at apprenticeships now. Cool. So in the industry, so not just for school leavers, but also people that have been in the industry for many, many years of upskilling them and using apprenticeships to do that.
So can I just touch on that really quickly? And obviously we'll come back to kind of the next steps, but school leavers, I think, is a big thing, especially at the moment. We're at that time of year. We're in May at the moment. We're reaching kind of end of exam period, grads, everything else. One thing that I think is really difficult, and we do have a session on this coming up as well, but as a grad, as a school leaver, you got no experience, right? At best, you may have had a paper round, if you're allowed to do those still. I don't know if you are anymore. But
magazines, I think.
How can someone with no experience have a personal brand or stand out in your opinion? When you look at a resume and you go, okay, this guy's got no experience, and neither of the 40 others that I'm looking at right now, what do they need to put on there that shows, actually, yeah, I'm willing to give this person a go? Because let's be honest, hiring anyone with no experience is a bit of a risk to any organization. But we also know from your experience and from our experience, you start at the bottom and you grow. So what do they need to do to stand out in your opinion? And
I guess it depends on the role. If you've got someone with no experience and they're wanting to go straight in and I want to be a shift manager in a warehouse over there or a transport operation, right? It's not going to happen. Yeah, you've got to build that knowledge and experience. If someone's going, look, I just want to get into work and I want to do something that's going to, develop me and get on with the job. then that's good enough for me at an entry level for a warehouse operative, let's say, right? Because you're right, you've got to give people the experience and a bit of a chance at some point. Doesn't always work. You do have people that come along and it doesn't quite work out, right?
Of course.
And then you have other people that really shining stars that you can give a little bit more to, just like happened with me. You can go do a project or get involved in, however big or small it is, and then they'll show you what they're about. But if you don't take that chance on people, it's not going to work.
So the Kev of 24 years ago knocks on your door today, right? And says, I'm fed up of getting cold and wet on a building site. Give me a job, right? How does the Kev of today do that? How does someone who's in your position go about doing that? And how do you, what do they need to put on their CV? Bearing in mind, they might not have any experience. Most businesses still want a CV. What are you looking for?
So for me in a CV, there's a couple of things I look for. So one, you've got to catch me straight away, otherwise I get bored reading them, right? I think that goes for a lot of people because you can trawl through loads of them.
Because you get a lot of you get high numbers of them. I think that's important just to let people know that you could have 50 to go through. So
50, 300 sometimes.
Well, yeah.
And also, just while we're on numbers, 7 seconds is all that a resume is read for. On average, 7 seconds.
Probably about 3
if
with
that,
me.
Yeah, there you go. But that's a prime example, right? I mean, if it is boring and you're not eye-catching, it's going to be deleted.
Visually, absolutely. You've got to look at it visually. I also do bounce up and down the CV and look for, if someone's in there and let's say they have got a couple of years under their belt, but they've moved around a fair bit. If moving around every couple of years, that's fine for me because you're gaining some experience. If you move around every couple of months, I kind of park that one. And
so stability is important.
Yeah, stability is really important for me. But actually, just picking up the phone or coming in and having a conversation, for me, it's generally about the feeling you get out of an individual. So if someone's sitting in front of you and they're talking to you and they're engaged and they're a bit enthusiastic, you get more out of that because you're going to get more because they're wanting something. They're wanting to give it a go. You get people that sit there and they're like, why have you gone for the job? Well, bit unsure, just want to get out the cold. Then for me, that doesn't really spark it. I kind of lose a bit of interest because there's no real desire and appetite there.
So interestingly, I was having a conversation today with a guy looking at our emails, and we were talking about the order of communication. And actually, it's commonly reported that the best form of communication is face-to-face interaction. The worst, by the way, is email is second worst. So the only thing below an email is a postage letter. So would you say then, bearing in mind that most places, and I'm sure where you work right now probably have the same thing, quick apply, send your resume in, we'll get in contact with you. Your advice would be to anyone, if you're just about to leave school, print off your resume, come down to the warehouse, knock on the door, ask to speak to the operations director and go, here's my CV and this is why I'm here. Because you have that interaction, you can see what the person's about. That would stand someone out effectively in your eyes.
Yeah, I mean, a bit extreme asking someone who's just left school to come and knock on a warehouse door. They won't do it. But the absolute concept of reach out there. If you go to a career fair and you're at a career fair and you've got people coming up and talking to you, generally get a good feeling of that and give me your details or point them in the right direction. I mean, for a warehouse operative role, generally, they can. You could be recruiting hundreds at once, or you could be recruiting tens, right? And there's probably a bit of a different process you'd go through there compared to maybe entry level or senior level management roles. So there's different ends of the spectrum, if you like, on how you do it, but definitely having a bit of confidence about you and just saying, look, I want to give something a go. There's no harm in giving it a go. It might not work first time or the first conversation. It might work the second time.
Yeah.
Word of mouth is a lot. If you've got someone who's giving you their best, even at a warehouse operative level, and they're saying, look, I've got this mate, I've worked with him before, he's a bit short of a job, or I've got this friend, their kid's coming out of school, that type of thing.
Recommendations.
Why not? Yeah.
And so on a CV, and I know it depends on what type of role, but one of my pet hates is where you get such a wordy summary where they've used words that they don't understand, and I definitely don't understand what they are. For say a warehouse operative or a, more of an entry type level position, is a summary better? Is it better for them to state things such as I've proven reliability by never missing a shift of my paper round, or like just some real factual things that are around? Because I would have thought reliability is probably number one. First of all, you want to make sure that they're going to turn up on time every day, unless obviously they're ill. I don't know, like things like that make it.
Yeah, because you mentioned interesting. So I suppose what makes it interesting to you? You know, what keeps you reading for longer than the 3 seconds?
Yeah, so I guess depending on the role we're looking at, right? But if we looked at a warehouse operative and just using that example, Ollie, that you said there, if someone puts on a CV that I'm reliable, I haven't missed a shift, I think that just probably gets lost in the ether.
Right.
Certainly for me, because what I'd be looking for is if they haven't got any experience, what have they been doing? So what have they been doing? If they've gone to college and they've done this, or they've learned a couple of things, and it's probably a different starting point than someone's had a few years experience.
Yeah.
If they've worked in a warehouse before and they have bounced around between 3 or 4 or just been agency providers, whatever it may be, then there's 2 things in my mind. One is, have they had a break, or actually why are they bouncing around? So a bit similar to if you're looking at more of them senior roles or functional roles, whereas if they haven't had that stability, then it becomes questionable.
It's kind of so, because I always say to people, use that personal statement as a reason why you're applying for this role, and if there is anything on your CV that you know is going to be pulled apart, just be transparent and declare it, kind of in that first couple of sentences.
Yeah.
Okay.
But sorry, if there's one that comes across and it says, look, I want to go work in a warehouse because I want to do this. I want to give it a go. I've not got the experience, but here's what I do want to do in my career, and this is what I want to build up to. It's probably a good way of capturing it, but you've got to get that at the very start. You can't be lost in translation throughout the rest of it.
Yeah, the bit that makes you, separates you,
and bite. Yeah.
Put at the top. Yeah. And what about then? Because you mentioned earlier that you have some management that report into you. What about those people who are listening to this who are in, supply chain or logistics management positions right now? What are you looking for on their kind of resumes? Because obviously it's very different to entry-level warehouse operative type positions.
Yeah, so again, stability is important, but not first and foremost. A lot of it for me is about the experience and what they've kind of been exposed to, if you like, and what they've done. So if I'm looking at someone in their CV and they've just been a shift manager and they're looking for, let's say, an ops manager or general manager role, and they've just been a shift manager and that's all they've really done, they can't really demonstrate, certainly in their CV, that I've gone away and I've done this bit of stretch project, or I've worked on this, or I closed down or opened up a warehouse, which is big transformation stuff, right? You might not necessarily be looking for that direct skill set, but it tells you that the things they've been involved in. So there's got to carry a bit of gravitas behind that and experience, other than just working on
sorry, mate. So that shows that they've got aspirations to move on from where they are currently. And when you said stretch projects, is that something that's outside of their normal remit? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
And where would you say then for them to put that? Because again, I'm in the back of my mind, I've got, that's got to be near the front, because if it's right down the bottom, you might not even get that far. But also if it's in a body of a text, like you say, if they're a shift manager for the last 10 years and they've actually done ABC project, but they're the bottom 3 bullet points, are you going to read that far, or does it need to be a separate section? How can they make that stand out?
For me, it needs to be probably in the first 1 or 2 sentences of their personal statement at the top, right? So, it could be something like, I'm an experienced shift manager who has worked on various different stretch projects, including, and then maybe just include one example, and then a bit more detail.
So you'd even
down.
Put it straight in that personal statement.
I'd put it straight in there.
Okay,
it depends what they're looking for. If they're going to apply for a job that says, look, I'm going for the next level here, I'm moving from a shift manager to an ops manager or a GM, then why wouldn't you put that? Because then you're just saying, look, I've done something a little bit different here, and then the rest of it will capture it. So you might have limited stretch projects or different things you've done, but
I guess it shows then as well that they've understood that the role is a stretch. So they're a shift manager, they're going for an ops role. They're not just saying, I can do it. They're saying, look, I understand. Not in those words, but I'm a shift manager, but I've stretched myself. This is what I've done because I want to become an ops manager.
And what about like when we talk about leadership? Because again, one thing I find, and a lot of people say to me is, I want to become a manager, but I've never managed people. Now, obviously, warehouse is very slightly different because you could be managing 20, 100, 200 people, right? So, but it does still amaze me how many people don't put stats and facts on their CV. So they just say, I lead a team. In your opinion, surely it's pretty important that someone writes, this is the team size I've had. This is the communication chain I've managed. Is it important if someone's managed managers? Is it important to know who they've reported to? Like, run me through kind of what a manager can do to give you an insight into their leadership capabilities.
Yeah, definitely size and scale. So depending on the job kind of you're going for, I guess you could, in the industry I work in, you could be managing a warehouse and you could be managing a warehouse of 50 people or 800-900 people. So if you've managed a shift, but you've managed a shift within a site that has got 800 people, let's say, choose that as an example, over 4 different shifts, you've managed a shift with 200 people, right? That's a completely different size and scale to managing 50 people.
Agreed.
So, are they probably more geared up to get a next level job? Then absolutely, you would look at that. So size and scale is, and then experience, and maybe some of the things they've had to deal with within that. So if you've been in a choopy transfer situation, or you've had to do large scale recruitments and things like that, startups, that's all relevant as well. And you're right, that key statistics will just give you a bit more of a flavour. So for me, if you're sparking a bit of interest and then you've got a little bit more detail, I will absolutely further read down the CV.
So if they've hooked you in the first bit.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And what you are looking for, and I think this is why for me it's important in the CVs at the start, is if people aren't communicating well at the start of a CV, then how are they going to communicate in the day job as well? And look, some people aren't academic and some people struggle with that type of stuff. So they're knocking on the door or having a conversation is key. And you hear a lot of businesses talk about promote within and things. You've got to bring people in from external as well to bring a different skill set and experience.
Of course you have, yeah.
But that promotion within is about them confidence as well. So you don't always get people that knock on your door and say, I'm up for the next job, Kev. How do I need to get there for it? They'll just wait until something's advertised and then they'll apply and then say, oh, I didn't get it.
And what about then? Because we touched on this in kind of the briefing conversations, but what percentage of boxes do people need to tick before applying for a job? Because you mentioned about someone who could step up, which is obviously what a lot of people look for when they move jobs. But that means they might tick less of the boxes needed to do that job. So what percentage of a brief or an advert do you think an applicant needs to match as a percentage, roughly, before they apply?
Yeah, for me, I would say there's a bit of a range. It's anywhere from 40 to 60%, right? It depends on the job or what the urgency of the job is. So if you've got some of the skills, but a lot of attributes that says this person could learn or develop or under a bit of guidance and coaching, bring the right attributes to the role, then that's a lot for me. When I'm interviewing, I tend to look for the personality of people more. You generally know within the first couple of minutes if you're going to connect. You get over the initial. It's a bit. This is
edgy.
Yeah. And then you're into it, and then as the conversation flows, you can go off script as well. You don't necessarily have to ask them technical questions. It's more about is this individual going to fit with my team or this organisation, and actually are we right for them as well? Are they going to get out what they're looking for?
So I suppose my next question, just as, again, from being in recruitment for 13 years, 14 years, 40% seems low. And I'm sure to a lot of people who listen would say, but if I only tick 40%, am I even going to get to interview stage? Bearing in mind, there's going to be a high level of applicants who probably are at the 60, 70, 80%. So, yeah, I guess kind of, at what point do they have too much experience? And is it a case of actually the volumes then play a part? Because if you do, if you have someone at 60, 70%, have they got more chance than someone at 60% of getting an interview, not getting the job, but just getting through that selection process?
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally they would, but the higher it kind of matches. But equally, as we were saying around the CVs, it's how are they capturing it and what are their kind of desires as well? Where do they want to get to? Because for me personally, that's quite telling. You've got someone there with an appetite and a desire to do something. Are they going to bring a little bit more than someone who's just got a bit of experience? And it depends on what you're looking for as well. If you're looking for someone in a very stable, let's say, warehouse that isn't really going through much change, you can have someone that kind of plods along with no desire to grow. If you're going through a bit of a transition, or there's something coming up that is going to rock the apple cart a little bit, then you're going to want some people that are there with you and wanting to grow with it. You might have another role in mind. You might be recruiting for a role over here with the view that in 12, 18 months' time, there's a change over here. And again, that's relevant back on the CV. So have they bounced around? What does their stable role look like? what does their experience look like? So I don't think there's any right or wrong answer. It's kind of hard for a variety of roles. But again, back to it, for me, it is about what that individual is all about as well. What are they going to bring? And can I learn something from them as well? A lot of people recruit people that, report into them, let's say, or report into their teams that aren't necessarily going to teach us something. For me, I'm always looking at what can I do? I want an easy life, right? I want an easy day. So the more I can bring people in that are going to do that, but I can learn something from, then the more I'm going to develop. And it's not always been the case. You don't always get it right, as I said earlier.
Yeah, for sure.
And I guess also, you don't know when in those roles how many are going to be above the 40%. So we have to balance, because we've also talked about against people applying for everything, even if they have no qualification, they're not qualified for the role, they don't tick any of the boxes. And that's when you get into the LinkedIn where you have a job come up and it says over 100 people have applied for this role. Well, yes, but don't not apply for it if you tick the boxes, because there's probably 99 of them haven't ticked any of them. So 40%, although seems low, it's worth it if it's something that you really want to do, and you can, like you said, Kevin, you can get that across in your CV or your opening statement, or you can reach out on LinkedIn and say, I've just applied for, please keep an eye out, I'm really keen because, or something along those lines.
Does it matter what that 40% is? Because I think it's probably important to note that there's a lot of transferability, right, in a lot of jobs. But there's also going to be some prerequisites, which naturally you've got your key skills part, and then you normally have must-haves or nice-to-haves, right? I guess it's important to anyone listening that the more, when we talk about boxes, it's the whole lot. And if you tick 40% of the skills, then great, you can apply. But if you don't then tick the qualification needed, you don't tick the location, you don't tick the right to work, you don't tick, the non-negotiable system skill, you don't tick the years of experience, all of a sudden that 60% will completely outweigh the 40%. So it's having a look at what the job brief says are non-negotiables, essentials versus nice to haves.
Yeah.
And that's probably the important part.
Absolutely. There are absolutely, as you say, some non-negotiables in there as well. There are some of those, some people might classify non-negotiables, but as that is it. But some of them are a bit like, do you give it a chance or not? And that isn't things like the right to work and stuff. That's absolutely non-negotiable. But also, look, they depend on the role. So if I look at management roles, for example, for me, and in third-party logistics, you've got to be obsessed with customers, right? So have you got good customer kind of obsession, and have you got some experience dealing with customers? That's kind of one of the things that tick the boxes. Are you good at leading people, and can you engage with them, and can you demonstrate that? And if you're not engaging yourself, even in your CV, then that's half the question answered,
half
right?
the issue, yeah.
And then if you got the ability to grow in terms of personally and individual, if you've got them three attributes, then for me, that's a bit of a starter for 10 as a recipe for success.
So what about then kind of, I guess, kind of as we're reaching the end, there's a couple of things I do want to attack. One being do's and don'ts of interviews. So to anyone who's listening, who's maybe nervous about interviews, maybe they're just entering the market, what are your kinds of do's and don'ts? If there were 3 things to definitely do in an interview and 3 things to definitely not, obviously without removing the common sense ones, what would they be?
I think the 3 do's for me would be come prepared. So do a bit of homework, legwork, whatever you want to call it. Doesn't have to be an exact company history and things, but just a little bit of prep around what the role's about. Come and make sure you kind of got some air of confidence about you. Don't overdo the confidence, but do have some air of confidence about your subject matter and talking, and make sure that the business you're applying for fits you as well as an individual. That's a definite do. People often have this perception that it's just the recruiter that's employing, but it's got to fit for both people, right? And if it doesn't seem right for you, that's definitely a do.
I've got a great example of that. I remember someone saying to me they want to apply for a job, and she was adamant she wanted to go forward. And it turns out that she was a vegan and this was a slaughterhouse. And I was like, look, there's just no way I can put you, you're not going to want to work for this organization. Yeah. So you have to make sure that you're reading everything properly. 100%.
Yeah.
So how do they do that? I guess through having intelligent questions that they want to ask.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's any harm in coming into the interview as well if you're a bit unsure and asking some questions off the offset and saying, right, can you just, before we get into it, can you explain me a bit about the role?
Yeah.
You know, I've had some where people have just said, look, I don't quite think this is right business for me, so I'm not going to waste any of our time. So thank you very much. I'll see you later.
So just sticking with the structure of do's and don'ts, obviously one thing that you mentioned at the first is probably what everyone expected. Be prepared, do a bit of research. What would be the 3 do's and don'ts of that? Because quite often I hear people saying, you know, I researched a website, and basically they regurgitate that first page of a website, right? So what would be the kind of 3 do's of research and 3 don'ts when it comes to preparation for an interview?
Yeah, so look, if you're going to go for a job, generally you go for it locally, right? So you're going to tend to, certainly in logistics environment with hundreds of people, you're going to know some people out there. So just reach out and have a chat, even if it is just reaching out to people on LinkedIn, seeing what it's about, seeing what they're about. Not necessarily just about the technicalities about the job, but about the type of people you might be working with as well. You know, I understand this person's here and you've got an ops manager or whatever it may be. So that's definite do. I think don't overdo it.
Right.
Don't do that. You know, you're founded in 1958 and all that noisy stuff. Definitely don't do that, because, you know, we know that you're not looking for that in an individual. Do a bit more about what is happening in the industry. So you might have read up a little bit of an article recently to say, oh, your business is doing this. I see what that's about. Can you tell me a bit more? Because that will just get a bit of personal conversation going. And then I think probably a last don't is, for me, just don't try and anticipate things that aren't there. So you might read something and think, oh yeah, I know about that. I'll bring a bit of expertise to it and I'll say I've got this experience and stuff, because generally you know whether it's right or wrong and you can call it out. So don't try and be something you're not, I guess, with that research and
so your kind of do's would be, do have a look at things like news articles, have a look at things like industry news, and have an understanding of what's going on. And I guess from there, do ask questions on your research, because ultimately that shows you've done the research anyway. So if you're going to bring an idea, for example, in this conversation we've spoken about automation and AI, you might come in and go, look, I'm really excited by this. Can you discuss to me and explain to me what is happening within the organization in relation to this and this?
Absolutely.
Because I've seen your competitors do that and that. All of a sudden, that's enough research, right? It doesn't need to be that regurgitation of timelines, all the services you offer. So that would actually be a don't, is don't go into too much.
And it's easy enough to find information, like research, like you said, not just on the website. You could probably find a number of people doing that exact job on LinkedIn at that company that will no doubt have a little bit of a a blurb about what it is they're actually doing, and it'll give you some interesting information about it and things that you can then ask in your questions. Oh, I noticed so and so was, who works there is doing such and such. Could you tell me a little bit more about that? Just shows a little bit more. I don't know.
Or even LinkedIn. So LinkedIn's great, right? So, I'll put posts on LinkedIn. Someone could say, right, I saw you put that post on. Just tell me a bit more about it.
Yeah.
And then you think, oh, actually, they've done a bit of research on me. What am I being interviewed type of thing? But that's all great stuff, because it's great.
I always say, whenever I prepare a candidate, I send them a link to the hiring manager's LinkedIn page. I say, just look at their journey. That will tell you who's interviewing you. Have a look at their education, have a look at their background. Sometimes, especially in certain sectors, HR, finance, whatnot. Sometimes the qualification where you've studied, it's just a nice, if someone comes in and goes, oh, I can see you studied at such and such university, I went there too, it's just that icebreaker, right?
Immediate connection.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess just touching on your do's and don'ts there. So the other do was connect with people on LinkedIn who are part of the business and have a look at who else is in the organization. Who have you got that that you can kind of just get some recommendations or feels from. And the don'ts would then be, don't assume, basically. Just because you see there's a supply chain issue with chips that go into cars back in 2020, don't just assume that's impacting every business. Ask questions, be inquisitive and do your research, but don't just come in thinking you know everything about the organization. Ask the right questions. Speaking of asking the right questions, green banner on LinkedIn. I think we're going to ask everybody this, aren't we? Because I see a lot of rubbish on LinkedIn, and I call it rubbish. A lot of people on LinkedIn are saying, don't use the green banner, makes you look desperate, makes you look like, you're crying out for help.
No one will be interested.
No one's interested, etc. What are your thoughts on the green banner?
I don't mind it, providing you've put a bit of content behind it. So if someone puts on LinkedIn, I'm open to work, right? Yes, it is a bit of an invite to go and have a conversation. But if someone puts on there, look, I'm open to work. Unfortunately, I'm getting made redundant from my business I'm currently in. This is what I'm looking for. This is what I'm about. If you want to have a chat, just give me a shout. Great. Don't just go out there and just invite loads of people to connect and stuff like that. Allow people to come to you.
And there is an option on LinkedIn for you to do that on the green banner, because it says open to work. And I know as a recruiter, you can see it. It will say you can put in the locations you're looking for work, what type of work, whether it's permanent or contract, and the sectors as well. So for anyone who's putting the green banner on, make sure you put at least that. Yeah, at least that.
And have you ever used the green banner to recruit? Like, in terms of, have you ever gone on LinkedIn and looked for open to work? But I suppose you'd have an internal talent team.
Yeah, we've got an internal talent team. So there will be some of that goes on, but I've personally not used that, no. Mm-hmm. But I have seen people on there that reach out, and, there was a recent business that I worked with. So it's home-based, and there were some people that I'd worked with in a previous life on there. And unfortunately, that business went into administration, right? And people put it on there, but I've used it to have a look and say, well, actually, who do I know in my connections, and can I share their profile as well?
So it's useful. And you don't look, if you get say you get 5 candidates through from your talent team for one of your ops roles, you don't look on LinkedIn, and if one's got a green banner, go, oh, probably not them. It doesn't determine any decisions. Yeah, so.
It doesn't.
So, and I think that's the key message to anyone, is it is always a preference. But so far, I am yet to meet a good recruiter, a good internal recruiter, or a good hiring manager who has said that the green banner is a bad thing. I've heard some people do it, maybe people who are a bit too...
I think it's going to be good if we can get someone on who does think it's bad.
Yeah, because I think it just comes down to a self-belief. And look, do you know what? If I was desperate for work and in a position where I'm absolutely desperate, like a lot of people were in COVID, remember, right? 100% I'm using that green banner and I'm going, do you know what? I need a job. Like, this is nothing to do with my what's the word I'm looking for here? Like self, I don't know, stature, whatever. Take all of that away. I'm here to tell everybody I'm open to work. I need a job desperately, or I'm in a bit of trouble.
Well, most people who need a job
are not?
Desperate. I mean, because none of us can afford to not have a job unless it's something that you've planned and you've saved for, which very rarely it is.
Yeah, I wouldn't do that.
If you're using it in the right manner, is it any different to dropping a CV into somebody?
No, exactly not.
What
exactly
is it? It's like trying to sell your car, but don't put an advert out.
Yeah.
It's like,
exactly.
How do I know that car's for sale?
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's a great example. Is if you're applying for a job anyway, what difference is it? And to me personally, if someone reaches out, like you say, they send me a message, they stand out above the other 200, and they've got the green banner on, but the hiring manager has told me this is an urgent need. Actually, it does help because I look at it and go, well, if they're open to work, they're probably going to be moving quicker than the people who are passively, tentatively. Yeah. Now, that's not my decision making, right? But that is something that in the back of my head, I go, well, okay, I need to move fast, otherwise this person's off the market.
And let's be honest, when you're recruiting, you want to get it done quick anyway, don't you? So if
speed
someone's
is one of the
available and open, then
biggest things, right?
Definitely.
So, right, wrapping up.
Wow, that's gone quick.
That's gone fast. Quick fire questions.
How many have we got this time? 5.
I've got 4, but I might just make one up on the spot.
Okay.
We'll see. All right. We'll see if you can guess the one that I've made up. Experience or education?
Experience.
Skills or attitude?
Attitude.
Mentorship or self-directed learning?
Ooh. I'll say mentorship.
Okay. Hamilton or Lando?
Hamilton.
Sausage or bacon butty?
Bacon.
Yeah, I'd have got
no
bacon.
one will know what one.
I thought you were going to ask me Burger King or McDonald's, but...
No, we done that last time.
You did, yeah.
Burger King,
I was Burger King.
Yeah.
Burger King.
Chinese or Indian takeaway?
Chinese.
That's a strong shout. I'm glad we done that at the end.
Yeah. Says a lot.
Kev, thanks a lot for coming on. Hopefully it hasn't been too much of an interrogation. And I think at this point, it's always important to let everybody know who's listening. If you do have any questions, there's something that, us or Kev have mentioned that you want a bit more insight on. Look, we've created this to help people. So if there are any questions, feel free to shoot us a message. Feel free to reach out to us, drop us a comment, and we'll do our best to get the answer to you. But for now, that's it for another episode.
Thanks, Kev.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.